26 years ago, in a quiet private clinic in Lusaka, Zambia, a baby girl was born just before sunrise. The nurses wrapped her in a soft white blanket and placed her in a small crib near the window. She had big curious eyes and tiny fingers that kept curling into fists, as if she was already trying to hold on to the world. But outside that room, a decision was being made that would shape her entire life. Her biological father, Jumam, stood in a narrow hallway holding a pen. He looked nervous but not confused. When the social worker gently asked if he was sure about giving up his daughter for adoption, he nodded and said quietly, "I'm not ready for responsibility. No long goodbye. No last look. Just a signature on the papers and a life-changing choice." Within minutes it was done. He walked out of the clinic alone, leaving his newborn daughter behind without knowing where she would go or who she would become. That baby girl would later be renamed Chidera Okonkwo. She would grow up never knowing the man who walked away that morning. She would never hear his voice, never see his face in childhood photos, never feel his presence at birthdays or school events. For her, he was just a blank space in her story. But life has a strange way of bringing unfinished chapters back. And sometimes the past doesn't return with love. It returns when money enters the picture. When Chidera was just a few weeks old, her life changed in the most beautiful way. She was adopted by Dr. Kofi Okonkwo and his wife, Amara Okonkwo, a well-known and respected couple living in Accra, Ghana. They were not just successful in their careers, they were known for their big hearts. Dr. Kofi was a medical specialist who helped build clinics in poor communities, and Amara worked closely with charities that supported women and children. But their greatest joy wasn't their work, it was becoming parents. From the very beginning, they treated Chidera like a miracle. They never hid the truth about her adoption, but they made sure she never once felt unwanted. "We chose you," Amara would always say with a smile. Their home was full of books, laughter, music, and deep conversations at the dinner table. They raised her with strong values: kindness, discipline, gratitude, and hard work. Love was never missing in that house. Chidera went to some of the best schools in Accra. She was curious and ambitious, always asking questions, always dreaming bigger. During school holidays, her parents took her across different African countries: Kenya, South Africa, Rwanda, Egypt, showing her the beauty and potential of the continent. Those trips opened her mind. She didn't just want a job one day. She wanted to build something meaningful. After university, Chidera followed her passion for technology and business. With support and guidance from her parents, she eventually moved to Nairobi, Kenya, where she started her own tech consulting firm. It wasn't easy in the beginning. There were long nights, failed pitches, and moments of doubt, but she had been raised to never give up. Slowly her company grew. Clients trusted her. Her name started to carry weight in business circles. Then tragedy struck. Dr. Kofi and Amara were involved in a private plane accident while traveling for charity work. The news shattered her world. The people who had chosen her, loved her, and shaped her future were suddenly gone. Yes, they had prepared financially and left her a $5 million trust fund for security. But at that moment the money felt empty. She would have given it all back just to hear their voices one more time. Because what they gave her was far more valuable than wealth. They gave her love. And that love built her life. 6 months after burying her parents, Chidera was slowly trying to find her balance again. She had thrown herself into work, spending long hours at her tech consulting office in Nairobi. The building was modern, full of glass walls and busy employees moving in and out with laptops and coffee cups. On the outside she looked strong and focused. On the inside she was still grieving. One quiet afternoon her assistant knocked gently on her office door. "There's a man here asking to see you," she said. "He says it's personal. He wouldn't give details." Chidera almost said no. She wasn't in the mood for surprises. But something in her assistant's voice made her pause. "Send him in," she replied. When the door opened, time felt like it slowed down. A tall man stepped inside. He looked older than his years, with tired eyes and deep lines across his forehead. He held his hands together tightly as if rehearsing what to say. For a few seconds neither of them spoke. Then he cleared his throat and said quietly, "My name is Jumam. I'm your father." The words hit her like a wave. Her chest tightened. She felt the air leave her lungs. "Father?" The man who signed papers and walked away before she could even open her eyes? She had imagined this moment before, but never like this. Not in her office. Not without warning. He went on quickly, almost as if afraid she would ask him to leave. He said he had searched for her for years. He said he regretted his decision every single day. He talked about being young and scared. He said giving her up was the hardest choice of his life. Chitra listened, but something didn't sit right. His words sounded polished, practiced, too smooth. He spoke about love, but there were no tears in his eyes, no shaking in his voice. And why now? Why appear 6 months after her parents passed away? Why not 5 years ago? She studied his face carefully, searching for something: guilt, warmth, truth. Instead, she felt a strange coldness. This wasn't just a reunion. It felt planned, timed. And deep down, she couldn't shake one question. If he had really been searching for her all these years, why did he finally find her only after the world found out she had money? A few days after that shocking visit, Chitra decided she would not meet Juma alone again. If this man was truly her biological father, then everything needed to be handled properly and legally. So she asked her trusted legal advisor, Advocate Naledi Masiko, to arrange a private meeting at her office in Nairobi. The room was quiet, professional, and serious. Nothing like the emotional reunion Juma had probably imagined. Juma walked in wearing a neat suit this time, looking more confident than before. He shook Naledi's hand firmly and gave Chitra a small smile, as if they were business partners about to discuss a deal. That made her stomach turn. After a few polite introductions, Juma stopped pretending. He leaned back in his chair and cleared his throat. I recently became aware of the size of your inheritance, he began carefully. He mentioned the trust fund. He mentioned the $5 million. He even used exact numbers. Chitra's eyes narrowed slightly. So this was really about money. Then came the sentence that changed everything. As your biological father, he said calmly, I believe I am entitled to half of that trust. Without me you wouldn't even be here. I made a sacrifice giving you up. It was for your own good. You should be grateful. The room went completely silent. Grateful? For being abandoned? For growing up without ever knowing where she came from? Chitra felt her heart pounding in her chest, but she refused to let her emotions explode. She simply stared at him, trying to understand how someone could say those words with a straight face. Juma continued talking, almost like he had rehearsed this speech many times. He said he had struggled in life. He said parents deserve support from their children. He even hinted that if she refused, he would consider taking legal action. He spoke about moral responsibility and family duty, twisting the situation to make himself sound like the victim. But the truth was clear. This was not about reconnecting. This was not about regret. This was about access. Chitra sat there in stunned silence, realizing something painful. The man who had once signed away his rights without hesitation was now claiming ownership over her success. He hadn't helped raise her. He hadn't paid for her education. He hadn't been there for birthdays, graduations, or sleepless nights. Yet somehow he felt entitled to the blessings built by the parents who chose her. And in that moment Chitra understood. This was not a father asking for love. This was a stranger demanding payment. When Chitra refused to agree to his demand, Juma changed his strategy. He stopped sounding like a calm businessman and started acting like a wounded father. The legal threats didn't work, so he decided to play with emotions instead. Within weeks, relatives from Lusaka, people Chitra had never even met, began calling her office. Some left voice messages saying she should respect her father. Others sent long texts about family loyalty and African tradition. It was overwhelming. These were strangers speaking to her as if they knew her whole life story. Juma had been busy. He contacted distant cousins, old family friends, and community members back in Zambia. He told them he was heartbroken. He said he had tried to reconnect with his daughter, but she had rejected him because she was now too rich and too important. He painted himself as a poor, aging father abandoned by an ungrateful child. And then the whispers moved online. Small blogs and social media pages started sharing vague posts about a wealthy businesswoman who denied her own father. People who didn't know the full story began commenting. Some accused her of forgetting her roots. Others said money had changed her. A few even said she should be ashamed. Chitra would scroll through the comments late at night, her heart heavy. It hurt, not because the strangers mattered but because the story was being twisted. She had never denied her heritage. She had never insulted Zambia. She simply refused to give money to a man who walked away from her. The emotional pressure started to build. Business partners quietly asked if everything was okay. A client hinted that negative publicity could affect her company's image. It felt like Juma was slowly trying to corner her, using culture and public opinion as weapons. But even in the middle of the noise, something didn't sit right with her. If he truly cared about her as a daughter, why start a public drama? Why try to shame her? Why involve strangers instead of building a real relationship? And the biggest question kept repeating in her mind. If he loved her so much, why did he wait 26 years to show it? Real love doesn't arrive with cameras, gossip, and demands. Real love shows up quietly and stays. And deep down, Chitra knew this wasn't love. This was pressure. Chitra wasn't about to let Juma's threats and emotional games go unchecked. She trusted advocate Naledi Masiko completely. And Naledi immediately decided the only way forward was to get the full story. She launched a thorough background investigation, determined to uncover the truth about the man who had suddenly appeared in Chitra's life after 26 years of silence. What they found was shocking. Juma Mwale had recently lost his construction company in Harare, Zimbabwe. The business had been involved in a fraud investigation, and Juma's personal finances were a mess. He was drowning in debt, creditors were knocking at his door, and bankruptcy rumors were spreading through the city. The man who once abandoned his daughter for convenience was now desperate. And it wasn't for love, it was for money. But that wasn't the worst part. Naledi dug deeper, sifting through old adoption and legal documents, letters and correspondence from years past. She discovered something that made Chitra's blood run cold. Juma had been given opportunities to reconnect with her over the years. Social workers had contacted him when Chitra was a child, giving him chances to see her, to reach out, even to build a relationship. And every time he refused, he had written in black and white that he wanted no future contact. It was clear now. His sudden appearance wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a long-lost father finally realizing the mistake of his life. It was timed, calculated, and motivated by desperation. All of his speeches about regret and lost time were just a mask, a carefully rehearsed story meant to manipulate her emotions. Chitra felt a mix of anger and clarity wash over her. The man who had walked away from her, who had abandoned her life before it even began, was now trying to rewrite history for his own benefit. He wasn't looking for love, reunion, or forgiveness. He was chasing her trust fund. For the first time, Chitra didn't feel shocked or guilty. She felt prepared. With this evidence in hand, she could confront Juma not as a helpless daughter, but as a woman fully aware of the truth, and ready to protect the life her adoptive parents had built for her. This was no longer just a family issue. It was a battle for justice, honesty, and respect, and Chitra was ready to win. The day of the courtroom showdown arrived, and Chitra walked into the Nairobi courthouse with her head held high. The marble floors gleamed under bright lights, reporters whispered outside, and a small crowd of spectators had gathered. Inside, the tension was thick. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a test of truth, loyalty, and justice. Juma sat across from her, looking calm and collected, his lawyer whispering arguments into his ear. When the case began, his lawyer stood and spoke confidently about biological entitlement and moral obligation. He painted a picture of a father wronged by life, claiming that blood alone gave him the right to share in Chitra's inheritance. He spoke of duty, of family, and of regrets that supposedly haunted Juma for decades. Chitra listened quietly, her jaw tight, while advocate Naledi rose to respond. She began by laying out the adoption records, clearly showing that Juma had signed the papers voluntarily. There was no coercion. There was no accident. He had given up all parental rights, and the decision had been documented officially. But Naledi didn't stop there. She pulled out financial documents showing Juma's recent debts, the collapse of his construction business, and the letters proving he had refused contact with Chitra for years. Every piece of evidence pointed to a simple fact: his sudden, paternal awakening had nothing to do with love or remorse. It was purely about money. Then came the final, most powerful piece of evidence. Naledi played a video message from Dr. Kofi Okonkwo, recorded before his passing. In it, Dr. Kofi spoke directly to anyone who might try to take advantage of Chitra. "This trust fund is for Chitra," he said firmly. "It is to protect her from anyone who resurfaces for selfish reasons. No one can take what we have built for her." The courtroom fell completely silent. Even Juma shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The judge leaned forward, reading every word carefully. The video left no room for interpretation. It was clear, deliberate, and unwavering. Chitra felt a wave of relief mixed with triumph. She had feared this moment, but now the truth was undeniable. The man who abandoned her could claim no right over her life, her work, or her inheritance. Justice wasn't just on her side. It had been written, recorded, and proven beyond doubt. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. But inside, Chitra simply sat back, calm, knowing she had honored the people who truly raised her and protected the life they built for her. The moment the judge's decision was announced, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Juma Mwale, who had walked in earlier with an air of confidence, now looked stunned. The ruling was clear. He would have no access to Chitra's trust fund. Not a single shilling. The judge made it plain. The adoption was legal, the parents' intentions were clear, and Juma's motives were selfish. Outside the courthouse, a swarm of reporters waited, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward, capturing every reaction. The story had already gone viral. Abandoned daughter denies father access to millions. Chitra stayed calm, standing beside advocate Naledi, answering questions politely. But all eyes were on Juma. At first he tried to hold himself together. He straightened his tie, adjusted his suit, and gave a few practiced words to the press. But under the relentless gaze of cameras and the murmurs of the crowd, his confidence began to crack. His voice wavered. His composure melted. What had been anger in the courtroom turned to raw desperation. He shouted that Chitra had betrayed him, that she was ungrateful, that she had forgotten her roots. Reporters recorded every word, and soon the clips were all over social media. But instead of sympathy, the world saw exactly what Chitra had known all along. A man who once discarded his own daughter was now chasing her for money. The mask of regret and fatherly love had fallen away, revealing greed, manipulation, and entitlement. People outside whispered and shook their heads. Some expressed outrage, others relief that justice had been served. Chitra, meanwhile, remained composed, knowing the fight was over. The public exposure of Juma's motives was far worse than any legal win. It was the truth laid bare for everyone to see. For the first time, Juma wasn't in control. The narrative he had tried to spin for years crumbled under the weight of facts, evidence, and the voice of the parents who had truly raised Chitra. He had tried to rewrite history, but the world now knew the truth. And as he left the courthouse, shoulders slumped, his anger replaced by shame, Chitra felt a quiet victory. Not just for herself, but for every person who had been abandoned and faced someone returning only for selfish gain. She had stood strong, and the world had seen her strength. Justice wasn't only served in the courtroom. It was seen, understood, and shared by everyone watching. A few days after the public courtroom drama, Chitra received a message from Juma. He wanted one last meeting. No lawyers. No cameras. Just the two of them. She felt a mix of curiosity and caution. Part of her wanted to see the man who had abandoned her face the truth in private. Another part worried about what he might say. The meeting was arranged at a quiet cafe in Nairobi, far from reporters and social media eyes. When she arrived, Juma was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked older than she remembered, his posture slightly hunched, hands nervously twisting a napkin. For a moment it seemed he might actually be humbled. He greeted her softly, almost shyly, and for a second it felt like they could talk. He tried to appeal to her emotions, speaking about regret, missed opportunities, and the love he had always carried in his heart. He told her he wanted a real relationship now. He said he was sorry for walking away. His voice wavered, as if searching for a tearful reaction from her. Chitra listened quietly, her expression calm, almost unreadable. She felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of pity. But she knew she had to speak clearly, with truth, not with revenge. Leaning forward slightly, she looked him in the eyes and said, "You gave up your rights the day you signed those papers. My parents chose me. You walked away." The words landed softly but firmly, like a hammer hitting stone. No shouting. No dramatic gestures. Just truth. Juma's face fell, and for the first time Chitra saw him speechless. The power he had tried to claim over her life was gone. He couldn't argue with what was simple, factual, and undeniable. The cafe was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. Chitra didn't need to yell. She didn't need to cry. The truth carried more weight than any anger or insult could. She realized that sometimes the most powerful response isn't revenge. It's calm, unshakable clarity. Juma sat there, broken in a quiet, private way that the cameras would never capture. Chitra stood, thanked him for coming, and walked out. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt free. The chapter of abandonment was closed. No one could touch the life her parents built, and no one could shake her sense of self. That quiet confrontation was more healing than any courtroom victory. It was the truth that hurt the most, and also the truth that finally set her free. After everything was over, Chitra took a deep breath and looked at the life her parents had helped her build. She realized that her story wasn't just about loss, betrayal, or money. It was about love, choices, and legacy. She decided to use a portion of her trust fund for something meaningful, something that could change lives just like her adoptive parents had changed hers. She started a foundation in Accra, Ghana, called the Okonkwo Legacy Initiative. Its mission was simple but powerful: to support abandoned and vulnerable children across Africa, giving them love, education, and opportunities to grow. Every child in the program would have access to what she had been given: care, guidance, and the chance to dream. She named it after Dr. Kofi and Amara Okonkwo to honor the people who truly raised her and built her future with love. Chidera wanted the world to know her story, not as a tale of revenge, but as a lesson in strength and compassion. She shared her journey openly, speaking at events and interviews about overcoming abandonment, facing selfish demands, and choosing to create good instead of dwelling on anger. People were inspired. Her story went viral not because of the fortune involved, but because of the courage and heart behind it. And when she finally reflected on Juma, she said it simply with quiet power: "He thought blood gave him ownership, but love built my future." The man who had once abandoned her came back for money, expecting her trust to be his. Instead, he left with nothing, only the weight of his own choices. She left with a legacy of hope, proving that family isn't always about blood, but about who chooses to love, protect, and guide you through life. Her life was no longer about what was taken from her. It was about what she chose to give.